The emergency session bells rang through the Grand Council chamber of Zarian Prime, their haunting melody echoing off crystalline walls that had stood for 3,000 years. Ambassador Kethvar of the Zephyrian Collective clutched his communication device with all four of his trembling hands, his normally blue skin now pale as moonlight. "Council members," he began, his voice cracking despite centuries of diplomatic training, "I bring news that will shake the very foundations of our peaceful galaxy." The chamber fell silent. Even the youngest representatives, those born long after the Great Disappearance, could sense the weight of this moment. "The monitoring stations at the edge of the spiral arm have detected them," Kethvar continued, his words barely above a whisper. "The signatures are unmistakable. The quantum footprints match perfectly with our ancient records. After 800 years of blessed silence, the humans are back." A collective gasp rippled through the assembled delegates. Some of the older members, those few who still carried genetic memories of the ancient times, began to shake visibly. General Thex of the Mandorian Empire, his carapace scarred from countless battles, dropped his ceremonial weapon with a clatter that seemed to thunder in the sudden quiet. "Impossible," wheezed Elder Vashti from the crystalline dominion, her ancient form pulsing with nervous light. The humans vanished completely. Every trace, every ship, every settlement. They simply left. Our greatest scientists concluded they had either destroyed themselves or transcended to another dimension entirely. Kethvar activated the central holographic display, showing the detected energy patterns that had triggered every early warning system across 17 star systems. The readings were unlike anything the current generation had ever seen. Wild, chaotic energy signatures that seemed to bend the very laws of physics. "These readings were taken just 72 hours ago," he announced. 3 separate deep space monitoring stations, each equipped with the most advanced detection equipment our combined civilizations can produce, all registered the same impossible signatures. The humans didn't just return, they're moving toward inhabited space. Representative Liss of the Peaceful Federation rose on her delicate legs, her voice steady despite the terror in her large, dark eyes. "Perhaps we should remind the younger members why this news fills us with such dread. Many here have only heard stories, legends they perhaps believed were exaggerated tales meant to frighten children." Elder Vashti's crystalline body dimmed as ancient memories surfaced. "Child, no story could capture the reality of what the humans were capable of. We called them the living nightmare not out of cruelty, but because they embodied our deepest fears made real. While we developed our civilizations through harmony, cooperation, and logical progress, they thrived on conflict, adapted to impossible conditions, and turned every challenge into an opportunity for growth." General Thex retrieved his weapon, his massive frame still trembling. "I was young during the last human conflicts, barely past my molting ceremonies. But I remember the reports, the casualty numbers that made no sense. Humans would take losses that should have crippled any military force, yet somehow emerge stronger. They would sacrifice themselves without hesitation to save complete strangers, then turn around and show ruthless efficiency when protecting their own. Their technology was never the most advanced," added Dr. Nyron of the Scientific Coalition, her tentacles nervously arranging and rearranging her research notes. "Yet they could somehow accomplish things that our greatest minds deemed impossible. They would jury-rig broken equipment into weapons of mass destruction, turn civilian vessels into unstoppable warships, and most terrifyingly of all, they never stopped learning, never stopped adapting." The chamber's atmosphere grew heavier as more members began sharing fragments of inherited memories and half-remembered tales. The humans had never been the largest empire, nor the most technologically advanced. They had controlled relatively few star systems compared to the great powers of their time. Yet somehow they had influenced the course of galactic civilization far beyond their actual size or strength. "What truly made them nightmarish," whispered Counselor Zarn of the Merchant Guilds, "was their unpredictability. Every other species follows patterns, operates within logical parameters. But humans? They would do things that made no tactical sense, yet somehow achieved victory. They would charge into hopeless battles singing ancient war songs, or spend decades planning elaborate strategies that relied on their enemies, underestimating their capacity for both cruelty and mercy." Representative Liss accessed her historical archives, displaying images that made several council members look away. These records show human settlements that survived planetary bombardments by hiding in cave systems, then emerging years later to rebuild their entire civilization. Here we see accounts of human diplomats who would negotiate peace treaties while their military prepared for total war, and somehow both approaches would succeed simultaneously. But why did they leave? Asked Junior Delegate Prim of the new colonies, her youthful voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. If they were so powerful, so adaptable, why did every human settlement, every ship, every trace of their civilization simply vanish overnight? The question hung in the air like a physical weight. It was the mystery that had puzzled galactic historians for 8 centuries. One day, humans had been actively engaged in trade, diplomacy, exploration, and their usual small-scale conflicts. The next day, every human presence in known space had simply disappeared. The prevailing theory, Dr. Nyron explained carefully, was that they had discovered something beyond our understanding. Perhaps they found evidence of an approaching threat so terrible that their only option was to flee to unknown regions of space. Or perhaps they achieved some form of technological transcendence that made our physical universe irrelevant to them. Or, General Thex added grimly, they were preparing for something. Humans never did anything without purpose, even when that purpose was incomprehensible to the rest of us. Their departure was too complete, too coordinated to be anything but planned. Cathvar gestured to the still active holographic display. Whatever their reasons for leaving, they have chosen to return. The question now is whether they come back as the same species that once made the galaxy tremble, or as something even more formidable after 8 centuries of unknown development. The silence that followed was broken only by the gentle hum of the chamber's life support systems, as dozens of different species contemplated the return of the galaxy's greatest enigma. Outside the chamber's windows, the lights of 1,000 different civilizations twinkled peacefully, a peace that had reigned for 800 years. That peace was about to end. Elder Vashti's crystalline form pulsed with soft blue light as she accessed memory files that hadn't been opened in centuries. The other council members leaned forward, knowing they were about to hear first-hand accounts of humanity's most legendary and terrifying achievements. "Let me tell you about the siege of Korthak Prime," she began, her ancient voice carrying the weight of witnessed truth. "I was there as a young diplomatic observer when the hegemony decided to test human resolve. The Korthak were a proud warrior race, masters of siege warfare who had never lost a defensive battle in over 2,000 years of recorded history." The holographic display shifted, showing the fortress world of Korthak Prime, a planet covered in impenetrable defensive installations, energy shields that could withstand star-killer weapons, and automated defense systems that had turned back the largest invasion fleets in galactic history. The humans arrived with a single colony ship and perhaps 1,000 civilian volunteers, Vashti continued. No military vessels, no siege weapons, no battle armor. The Korthak warlords laughed at them, even broadcast their amusement across the galaxy. They declared they would demonstrate proper siege warfare by starving the humans out slowly, making an example of them. General Thex's scarred carapace clicked nervously. "I remember hearing about this as a cadet." The human response was unexpected. "Unexpected doesn't begin to describe it," Vashti replied, her light patterns shifting to display archived footage. "The humans didn't attempt to break the siege or attack the fortifications. Instead, they landed on the planet's smallest moon, a worthless chunk of rock with no strategic value. The Korthak ignored them completely." The display showed grainy images of humans in simple environmental suits working tirelessly on the barren moon's surface. They appeared to be mining, but their equipment was crude, improvised from civilian manufacturing tools. "For 6 months the humans dug," Vashti continued. "They worked in shifts that would have killed most species, sleeping only a few hours before returning to their excavations. The Korthak treated it as entertainment, placing bets on how long the humans would last before surrendering or dying from exhaustion." Dr. Nyron's tentacles writhed with interest. "What were they mining?" "The geological surveys showed that Moon contained nothing but ordinary rock and trace minerals." Elder Vashti's form brightened, the equivalent of a grim smile. "That's exactly what they wanted everyone to believe. You see, humans had spent those 6 months not just mining. They had been studying orbital mechanics, calculating gravitational effects and learning everything about the moon's composition and trajectory." The holographic display suddenly shifted to show the devastating conclusion. The small moon, its internal structure carefully weakened by months of precise excavation, had been nudged just slightly out of its orbit. The images showed the moon fragmenting exactly as planned, creating a debris field that bypassed every planetary defense while gravitational forces pulled the fragments directly toward the planet's surface. Impossible, breathed Representative Liss. The calculations required for such precision would take our best AI systems years to complete. The humans did it with handheld calculators and paper notebooks, Vashti replied. But that wasn't the truly terrifying part. The Korthak military scrambled to intercept the debris, thinking they could prevent the impact. That's when they discovered the humans had been right about the moon's composition. Every fragment was loaded with rare minerals that their sensors couldn't distinguish from ordinary rock. General Thex's breathing became labored. Those minerals became nuclear weapons the moment they entered the planet's atmosphere, Vashti confirmed. The humans had turned an entire moon into a delivery system for the largest bombardment in recorded history. But here's what made it a nightmare rather than just a clever military strategy. They calculated the impact zones to avoid all civilian populations and cultural sites. They destroyed every military installation on the planet, while leaving the cities and historical monuments completely untouched. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. It wasn't just the scale of the achievement that was terrifying. It was the precision, the careful consideration for civilian life even while demonstrating overwhelming destructive capability. The Korthak surrendered immediately, Vashti continued. Their warlords, who had spent 2 millennia perfecting the art of siege warfare, declared the humans to be honorable beyond understanding and terrible beyond imagination. Many of them requested to serve under human command, claiming they finally understood what true military leadership looked like. Councillor Zarn of the Merchant Guilds accessed his own historical files. That was just one example among hundreds. I have trade records from the human colonial period that still make my accounting algorithms crash. They would establish colonies on planets that our surveys classified as completely uninhabitable, then somehow not just survive but thrive. The display shifted to show images of human settlements in the most hostile environments imaginable. Colonies built inside active volcanoes, floating cities on gas giants with crushing atmospheric pressure, underground settlements on worlds bathed in lethal radiation. Look at this one, Zarn pointed to a particularly impossible-looking settlement. New Terra Scotia, built inside the event horizon of a black hole. Our physicists insist that's physically impossible, that time dilation alone should have made communication with the outside universe impossible. Yet somehow they maintained regular trade relationships and even hosted diplomatic meetings. Dr. Nyron pulled up scientific reports from the era. I've been studying human technological adaptations for 3 centuries. Their approach to science was fundamentally different from every other known species. While we developed technology through careful theoretical advancement, humans seemed to reverse engineer the universe through pure stubborn determination. The display showed human engineers working with technology that violated several fundamental laws of physics. They would take broken alien equipment and somehow make it work better than when it was new. They would combine technologies from completely incompatible civilizations and create hybrid systems that should have exploded, but instead revolutionized entire industries. But the most unsettling aspect, added Representative Liss quietly, was their capacity for both incredible cruelty and overwhelming kindness, often simultaneously. I have records of human military units that would fight to the last soldier to protect enemy civilians, then turn around and show such tactical ruthlessness that experienced warriors would weep in terror. Elder Vashti nodded slowly. That's what made them truly nightmarish. You could never predict whether you would encounter the humans who would sacrifice their own lives to save your children, or the humans who would systematically dismantle your entire civilization with surgical precision. Often they were the same individuals. General Thex accessed military records that made his carapace plates rattle. The Battle of the Three Suns remains required study at our military academies, not as an example of strategy, but as a warning about human psychology. 3 separate human commanders, each facing impossible odds, each choosing completely different approaches to the same tactical situation. The display showed the legendary battle where human forces had been outnumbered 1,000 to 1 by a coalition of hostile species. Commander Sarah Chen chose to negotiate, somehow convincing half the enemy forces to switch sides through pure diplomatic skill. Commander Miguel Santos chose direct assault, leading a charge that should have been suicide but somehow broke the enemy's will to fight. Commander Zhang Wei chose to disappear entirely, then reappeared 6 months later, having somehow convinced the enemy's home governments to recall their fleets. All three approaches succeeded. Thex continued. 3 different human minds facing the same impossible situation, each finding a completely different path to victory. That's when our military strategists realized that conventional warfare against humans was pointless. They would always find options that we couldn't even imagine. Dr. Nyren tentatively raised a scientific question that had puzzled researchers for centuries. Did we ever determine whether humans were actually a single species? Their behavioral range seemed to exceed the normal parameters for biological consistency. The question hung in the air ominously. It was one of the great mysteries of human biology. How a single species could display such extreme variation in capabilities, psychology, and approach to problem-solving while maintaining clear genetic and cultural unity. Perhaps, Elder Vashti said quietly, that's something we'll finally learn now that they've returned. Whether the humans who disappeared 8 centuries ago are the same ones coming back, or whether 800 years of unknown development has created something even more formidable. Outside the council chamber, the peaceful lights of 1,000 civilizations continued to twinkle, unaware that their greatest challenge was returning from the darkness between the stars. The archives deep beneath the council chamber contained records that few beings had ever accessed. Dr. Nyren's security clearance granted her access to the classified files from the period known as the Final Year, the 12 months leading up to humanity's complete disappearance from known space. Council members, she announced, her tentacles carefully handling data crystals that contained some of the galaxy's most closely guarded secrets. I believe understanding the circumstances of their departure is crucial to preparing for their return. What I'm about to share has remained classified for 8 centuries, but given current circumstances, the Oversight Committee has granted emergency disclosure. The holographic display darkened, then began showing intercepted communications from human colonies, military bases, and exploration vessels from that final year. The timestamps showed messages spanning the entire 12-month period. But there was something deeply unsettling about the pattern of communications. The first anomaly we detected, Dr. Nyren explained, was a sudden increase in human deep space exploration activities. Not their usual colonial expansion or resource surveys, but something far more systematic. They were mapping regions of space that had no strategic value, no habitable planets, no useful resources. Elder Vashti studied the star charts with growing confusion. Those coordinates, they lead to the void regions beyond the galactic rim. Why would anyone want to explore empty space? That's what every intelligence agency in the galaxy wondered, Dr. Nyren replied. But the humans weren't just exploring randomly. Look at this pattern. The display highlighted the exploration routes, revealing a complex 3-dimensional grid that covered vast regions of apparently empty space. General Thex's experienced eye immediately recognized the military implications. That's not exploration, that's reconnaissance. They were mapping something specific, something they already knew was out there. The display shifted to show intercepted diplomatic communications between human colonies. The messages were heavily encrypted, but the cryptographic teams had eventually broken most of the codes, decades after the humans had vanished. These communications reveal growing concern about something they called the approach, Dr. Nyren continued. The humans were tracking what they described as anomalous gravitational signatures, moving through intergalactic space toward our galaxy. Based on their calculations, whatever they detected was massive, larger than entire star systems. Representative Liss examined the gravitational data with growing alarm. Did our own astronomical surveys detect these anomalies? That's the truly disturbing part, Dr. Nyren admitted. We found no trace of any unusual gravitational activity during that period. Either the humans were detecting something beyond our technological capabilities, or they were responding to information they had obtained through means we don't understand. The holographic display now showed the final series of human activities before their disappearance. Massive construction projects had begun simultaneously across every human settlement. But the structures being built defied easy categorization. These installations appeared to be some form of transportation infrastructure, Dr. Nyren explained. But unlike anything in our technological databases, the energy requirements alone should have been impossible for human industrial capacity to sustain. Yet somehow they completed these projects in just 6 months. Counselor Zarn studied the construction records with growing bewilderment. The resource acquisition patterns make no economic sense. They were purchasing or trading for materials from across the galaxy, but not standard industrial supplies. Exotic matter, quantum crystalline structures, temporal stabilizers, equipment typically used only in theoretical physics experiments. And they weren't buying small quantities, Dr. Nyren added. The humans acquired enough exotic matter to build a dozen reality manipulation devices. The temporal stabilizers alone represented more advanced physics than most civilizations develop in millennia of research. The display showed the final month before the disappearance. Human diplomatic activity had reached frantic levels, with ambassadors visiting every major civilization to sign what appeared to be standard trade agreements and mutual aid pacts. We initially thought these diplomatic activities were routine, Elder Vashti recalled. Human ambassadors had always been thorough in their relationship management. But when we analyzed the agreements afterward, we discovered they contained unusual clauses. The legal documents appeared on the display, highlighting sections that had seemed innocuous at the time but now carried ominous implications. Every agreement contained provisions for temporary stewardship of human assets and cultural preservation protocols in the event of extended human absence from galactic affairs, Dr. Nyren read aloud. They were preparing for their own disappearance months in advance. General Thex's scarred carapace clicked with nervous energy. The military intelligence reports from that period show increased human defensive preparations, but not against any identifiable threat. They were fortifying their colonies against something that didn't exist in our databases. The display showed images of human military installations being retrofitted with exotic defensive systems, energy shields that bent space-time, weapons that fired projectiles through dimensional rifts, communication arrays that seemed designed to operate across impossible distances. The most unsettling aspect, Dr. Nyren continued, was how normal human civilian life remained throughout this entire period. While their governments and military forces were obviously preparing for something catastrophic, ordinary human citizens continued their daily routines as if nothing unusual was happening. Representative Liss found this detail particularly disturbing. That level of operational security and population management suggests either incredible governmental control or willing cooperation from the entire human species in a deception campaign spanning multiple star systems. Or, Elder Vashti suggested quietly, the humans had found a way to share information instantaneously across vast distances, allowing them to coordinate activities that appeared independent, but were actually part of a single, galaxy-wide plan. The final records appeared on the display, surveillance footage from the last day anyone observed human activity. Across dozens of star systems, humans could be seen going about apparently normal activities. Then simultaneously across the entire galaxy, every human simply stopped what they were doing. At exactly 1427 Galactic Standard Time, Dr. Nyren narrated, every human in known space suspended their current activity and moved toward the transportation installations they had built. There was no apparent signal, no visible communication, no obvious coordination mechanism. They just knew. The footage showed humans walking calmly toward the strange installations, families carrying simple luggage, military personnel maintaining formation, scientists carrying research equipment. There was no panic, no resistance, no apparent coercion. They moved with the purposeful determination that had characterized human behavior throughout their known history. The installations activated simultaneously, Dr. Nyren continued. Energy readings spiked beyond our measurement capabilities. Space-time itself seemed to ripple around each facility, and then, nothing. When the energy dispersed, every human settlement, every ship, every trace of their civilization had simply vanished. Counselor Zarn accessed the economic impact reports from the years following the disappearance. The immediate aftermath was catastrophic for galactic trade. Humans had been involved in approximately 40% of all interstellar commerce, not as the largest traders, but as the most innovative problem solvers. When they vanished, entire industries collapsed because no one else understood the hybrid technologies they had created. The scientific impact was even more severe, Dr. Nyren added. Human researchers had been collaborating on projects across the galaxy. When they disappeared, they took with them solutions to problems that we still haven't been able to solve 8 centuries later. General Thex reviewed military records that showed the strategic impact. Several ongoing conflicts simply ended because the combatants realized they had been relying on human mediation or strategic advice. Without human involvement, the warring parties discovered they had no idea how to achieve their original objectives. Elder Vashti dimmed her crystalline form as she contemplated the broader implications. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their disappearance was how completely it was executed. They left behind no messages, no explanations, no clues about their intentions or destination. It was as if they had planned not just to leave, but to ensure that no one could follow them. Until now, Representative Liss said quietly, whatever they were preparing for 8 centuries ago, whatever threat they detected that we couldn't see, whatever plan they implemented so perfectly, it appears to have reached its conclusion. The council chamber fell silent as the members contemplated the implications. The humans hadn't simply abandoned the galaxy. They had prepared for something, protected themselves from something, and now they were returning. The question was whether they came back as refugees from a threat beyond imagination, or as something far more formidable than the species that had once been called the living nightmare. Outside T, 800 years had transformed the galaxy into something the ancient humans would barely recognize. As the council session continued, members began sharing records of how their civilizations had evolved during the long period of human absence, a time that historians called the Great Peace. Ambassador Kethvar activated the cultural database, displaying images of the Zephyrian Collective's greatest achievement, the Harmony Worlds. These were planets where the Zephyrians had perfected their natural telepathic abilities, creating societies where conflict was nearly impossible because every citizen could feel the emotions and thoughts of their neighbors. Without the humans' unpredictable influence, Kethvar explained, we were finally able to develop our civilization according to our natural inclinations. The Harmony Worlds represent the pinnacle of Zephyrian culture, perfect empathy, complete understanding, and absolute peace. The images showed crystalline cities that seemed to grow organically from the landscape, their inhabitants moving in perfect synchronization as they shared thoughts and emotions freely. There were no weapons, no military installations, no defensive barriers. The Zephyrians had achieved their ultimate dream of a society based entirely on mutual understanding. It's beautiful, Representative Liss admitted, though her tone carried an undertone of concern. But how would such a society handle unexpected challenges? Threats that require rapid adaptation or unconventional responses? Kethvar's skin color shifted slightly, the Zephyrian equivalent of an uncomfortable pause. We haven't encountered such situations during the Great Peace. Our mathematical models indicate that sufficient empathy and understanding can resolve any conflict through peaceful negotiation. General Thex accessed the Mandorian Empire's historical archives, showing the dramatic transformation his people had undergone. The Mandorians followed a different path. Without humans to provide unpredictable tactical challenges, we developed the most sophisticated military doctrine in galactic history. The display showed massive war games involving millions of participants, battles fought with perfect precision according to strategic principles refined over centuries. Every possible combat scenario had been analyzed, cataloged, and countered. The Mandorian military had become a work of art in its precision and efficiency. Our officer training programs now take 200 years to complete, Thex continued with obvious pride. Every Mandorian warrior studies 10,000 historical battles and can execute any of 50,000 approved tactical formations. We have achieved military perfection. Dr. Nyren studied the Mandorian battle records with scientific interest. But these war games and training exercises, they're all based on conflicts with known enemies using conventional tactics. What happens when faced with an opponent who doesn't follow established patterns? Thex's scarred carapace clicked defensively. Our strategic databases contain responses to every conceivable threat. The probability of encountering a truly unknown tactical approach is mathematically negligible. Elder Vashti shared the Crystalline Dominion's achievements, displaying the most advanced scientific installations the galaxy had ever seen. We focused our efforts on pure research, developing technologies that approach the theoretical limits of physical law. Our computing systems can predict the movement of every particle in a solar system. Our energy manipulation can alter the fundamental forces of nature. The images showed laboratory complexes that dwarfed entire moons, experiments that manipulated the fabric of reality itself. The crystalline scientists had spent 8 centuries pushing the boundaries of knowledge in every direction. We have solved problems that once seemed impossible, Vashti continued. Disease, aging, resource scarcity, and all eliminated through applied science. Our newest projects involve creating pocket universes and manipulating the flow of time itself. Representative Lais examined the scientific achievements with growing unease. These are incredible advances, but they all seem to follow logical, predictable paths of development. What about discoveries that emerge from less conventional approaches to problem solving? Elder Vashti's light patterns flickered uncertainly. Our research methodology is based on systematic exploration of all theoretical possibilities. Random or intuitive approaches would be inefficient and unreliable. Counselor Zarn displayed the economic miracles achieved by the merchant guilds during the Great Peace. Without human unpredictability disrupting our markets, we created the most stable and prosperous economic system in galactic history. Every trade route is optimized, every resource flow is perfectly balanced, every economic indicator remains within optimal parameters. The economic charts showed centuries of steady, predictable growth. No market crashes, no economic upheavals, no unexpected disruptions. The galaxy's economy had become a precision instrument that operated with clockwork reliability. Unemployment is essentially zero, Zarn announced proudly. Every citizen has a predetermined role based on their biological and psychological profiles. Resource allocation is perfectly efficient. We have eliminated economic uncertainty entirely. Dr. Nyren raised a troubling question. But what happens when unexpected events require rapid economic adaptation? How would your system handle disruptions that fall outside the established parameters? Zarn's confidence wavered slightly. Our economic models account for all known variables. The probability of significant unexpected disruptions during peaceful periods is extremely low. Representative Lais shared the achievements of the Peaceful Federation, showing worlds where conflict had been completely eliminated through advanced social engineering. We developed technologies that can predict and prevent aggressive behavior before it manifests. Our citizens live in perfect harmony because we can identify and correct antisocial tendencies at the neurological level. The images showed utopian societies where violence was literally impossible. Citizens had been neurologically modified to feel physical pain when experiencing aggressive thoughts, making conflict psychologically unbearable. Crime rates have been zero for 6 centuries, Lais announced. Wars are impossible because our citizens cannot conceive of harming others. We have achieved the ultimate peaceful society. Elder Vashti dimmed her crystalline form as a disturbing pattern became apparent. Council members, as I listened to these achievements, I noticed something troubling. Every one of our civilizations has developed by eliminating uncertainty, unpredictability, and adaptive challenges. The chamber fell quiet as the implications sank in. During the 8 centuries of human absence, every major civilization had evolved toward perfect efficiency, absolute predictability, and complete control over their environments. They had achieved their greatest dreams by eliminating the need for adaptation. The Zephyrians eliminated conflict through perfect empathy, Vashti continued. The Mandorians eliminated uncertainty through perfect military doctrine. The crystalline scientists eliminated the unknown through systematic research. The merchant guilds eliminated economic disruption through perfect planning. The Peaceful Federation eliminated aggression through neurological modification. General Thex's scarred carapace began to click nervously as he realized what Vashti was suggesting. You're saying that without humans to provide unpredictable challenges, we've all become specialized beyond our ability to adapt. Precisely, Dr. Nyren confirmed, her tentacles writhing with growing alarm. We've created civilizations that function perfectly within their design parameters, but which may have lost the ability to handle truly unexpected situations. The holographic display showed a comparison between current galactic civilization and the chaotic, unpredictable period when humans were active. During the human era, Every species had been forced to maintain flexibility, to develop contingency plans to expect the unexpected. They had been constantly adapting, constantly learning, constantly growing. Now, after 8 centuries of peace and optimization, they had achieved perfection, but it was a brittle perfection that had never been tested against genuine uncertainty. "Look at our response to the news of human return," Representative Liss said quietly. "We immediately called an emergency session because our perfectly ordered societies have no protocols for dealing with truly unpredictable situations. We've spent 8 centuries becoming more efficient, but we may have forgotten how to be resilient." The council members stared at each other as the full implications became clear. They had achieved their greatest civilizational dreams during humanity's absence, but in doing so, they had created societies that were the exact opposite of what had made humans so formidable. Adaptable, resilient, and capable of thriving in chaos. Outside the council chamber, the lights of 1,000 perfectly ordered civilizations continued to shine, beautiful and efficient and utterly unprepared for the return of chaos incarnate. The humans were coming back to a galaxy that had forgotten how to be unpredictable, and no one knew whether that would prove to be a blessing or a catastrophe. The emergency reports began flooding in while the council was still in session. Ambassador Kethvar's communication device buzzed with increasing urgency as monitoring stations across the galaxy detected phenomena that shouldn't exist. "Council members," he announced, his voice tight with barely controlled panic, "I'm receiving real-time updates from our Outer Rim monitoring stations. The human signatures aren't just moving toward inhabited space. They're already here." The central holographic display activated automatically, showing incoming data streams from dozens of observation posts. The information was contradictory, impossible, and absolutely terrifying. Dr. Nyron's tentacles trembled as she processed the scientific readings. "These energy signatures are appearing simultaneously in 17 different star systems, but that's physically impossible. Even at faster than light speeds, it would take months to travel between these locations." Elder Vashti accessed her crystalline network's computational resources, trying to make sense of the data. "The quantum resonance patterns suggest the presence of massive structures, but our visual scans show empty space. It's as if something enormous is there, but invisible to conventional detection methods." "Or," General Thex suggested grimly, "they're using technology so advanced that our sensors can't properly interpret what they're detecting." Representative Liss received an urgent message from the Peaceful Federation's border worlds. Her usual calm demeanor cracked as she read the report. "Councilor members, I have disturbing news from our outer colonies. 3 separate worlds have reported the appearance of structures that match no known architectural patterns." The display shifted to show grainy images transmitted from the edge of Federation space. The structures were clearly artificial but followed no aesthetic or engineering principles found in any galactic database. They seemed to shift and change even while being observed, as if they existed partially outside normal spacetime. "The structures appeared overnight," Liss continued, her voice shaking. "Our colonists report that the buildings simply materialized. No construction equipment, no advanced preparation, no detectable energy expenditure. One moment there was empty landscape. The next moment there were installations that our engineers insist should collapse under their own impossible geometry." Councillor Zarn's merchant networks had begun reporting even more disturbing information. Trade vessels throughout the spiral arm are detecting ships that don't appear in any registry. The vessels are following trade routes that were abandoned centuries ago, routes that only the humans ever used because they were considered too dangerous for conventional navigation. The holographic display showed shipping lanes that traced paths through asteroid fields, solar storms, and gravitational anomalies that required split-second navigation decisions and constant course corrections. No automated system could handle such routes, yet the mysterious ships were navigating them perfectly. "Our traffic control systems can't get response signals from these vessels," Zarn continued. "They're not using any known communication protocols, not following standard navigation beacons, not registering with customs authorities. They're simply traveling as if our entire interstellar infrastructure doesn't exist." General Thex received tactical reports that made his scarred carapace click with anxiety. Mandorian patrol fleets have encountered phenomena that our military doctrine has no classification for, ships that appear solid on sensors, but phase through asteroid fields as if they're made of light. Vessels that seem to be traveling slower than light, but somehow arrive at their destinations before they should. The military reports included video footage that defied logical explanation. Ships that appeared normal until they encountered obstacles, then seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Formations that maintained perfect organization while moving through space in ways that violated basic physics. Most disturbing, Thex continued, our tactical AIs are reporting calculation errors when trying to predict the movements of these vessels. Our computers simply cannot process whatever navigation principles they're using. Dr. Nyren reviewed the scientific data with growing alarm. Council members, I've been analyzing the quantum signatures, and I've discovered something that challenges our understanding of dimensional physics. These readings suggest that the returning humans aren't just using advanced technology, they appear to be operating from multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. The display showed quantum mechanical equations that hurt to look at directly. The mathematics involved concepts that pushed the boundaries of theoretical possibility. In simple terms, she explained, it appears that the humans have somehow learned to exist in several different dimensional states at once. They're physically present in our reality, but also maintaining connections to elsewhere. This would explain how they can appear in multiple locations simultaneously, and why their technology seems to ignore conventional physical laws. Elder Vashti's crystalline form pulsed with computational overload as she tried to process the implications. If they've achieved multi-dimensional existence, then they've become something beyond our current understanding of life itself. They wouldn't just be technologically superior. They would be operating according to entirely different rules of existence. The reports continued to flood in, each more impossible than the last. Zephyrian telepaths reported detecting thoughts that weren't quite thoughts, mental patterns that seemed familiar yet incomprehensibly complex. Crystalline scientists observed their most sensitive instruments malfunctioning in the presence of the mysterious structures, as if reality itself was being rewritten in localized areas. Representative Liss received an update that made her large, dark eyes widen with terror. Council members, I've just received a report from our border colony on Serenity Prime. The colonists report that one of the mysterious structures opened. The chamber fell absolutely silent. Even the gentle hum of life support systems seemed to pause. They describe figures emerging from the structure, Liss continued, her voice barely above a whisper, humanoid in shape but different. The colonists report that these beings appear normal at first glance, but when observed directly, they seem to exist in multiple states simultaneously, young and old, present and absent, familiar and utterly alien. Dr. Nyren's scientific training warred with growing panic. Did the colonists attempt communication? That's the most disturbing part, Liss replied. According to the report, the beings didn't need to communicate. They seemed to understand everything about the colony, its purpose, its inhabitants, its needs, without any exchange of information. They simply knew. Counselor Zarn accessed financial networks and discovered economic patterns that made no logical sense. Trading posts throughout the galaxy are reporting the arrival of goods that haven't been available for 8 centuries. Materials, technologies, even cultural artifacts that vanished with the humans are suddenly appearing in markets across known space. But here's the impossible part, he continued. These goods aren't old salvage or museum pieces. They're new, freshly manufactured but using production techniques that were lost when the humans disappeared. It's as if someone has been maintaining human industrial capacity for 8 centuries in complete isolation. General Thex received tactical updates that forced him to question everything he thought. He knew about military strategy. Mandorian intelligence reports that several contested border regions have suddenly stopped being contested. Conflicts that have been ongoing for decades simply ended when the mysterious ships appeared in those systems. The military data showed something unprecedented. Warring factions laying down their weapons not through negotiation or defeat, but through some form of spontaneous recognition that their conflicts had become meaningless. The combatants report that in the presence of these ships, they suddenly understood the futility of their territorial disputes, Thex explained, not through coercion or mind control, but through a clarity of perspective that made their wars seem small. Ambassador Kethvar synthesized all the incoming reports into a single, terrifying conclusion. Council members, what we're observing isn't just the return of humanity as we knew them. Based on these reports, the humans have spent 8 centuries becoming something that transcends our understanding of what sentient life can be. They appear to have mastered dimensional physics, developed technologies that rewrite local reality, achieved some form of multiversal awareness, and possibly evolved beyond the limitations of linear existence, Dr. Niren added. If these reports are accurate, we're not facing the return of a species. We're facing the return of beings who have become something approaching gods. Elder Vashti dimmed her crystalline form as the full implications became clear. And they're not just returning randomly. The pattern of appearances, the locations they've chosen, the timing of their emergence, it's all coordinated with the same precision they demonstrated 8 centuries ago. Which means, Representative Liss concluded quietly, whatever they left to accomplish, whatever threat they were preparing for, whatever plan they implemented, it's reaching its completion. The humans aren't just back. They're ready for something. Outside the council chamber, the lights of 1,000 perfect. The council chamber's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as a new presence made itself known. There had been no alarms, no security breaches, no indication of unauthorized entry. Yet suddenly, unmistakably, someone else was in the room. She appeared gradually like a photograph developing in slow motion, first a shimmer in the air, then the suggestion of a human form, finally resolving into a woman who seemed both exactly as humans had always been, and fundamentally different in ways that hurt to contemplate directly. "Greetings, Council of Zerion Prime," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through dimensions the assembled delegates couldn't perceive. "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, speaking for the Human Collective. We apologize for the abrupt nature of our return." The council members sat frozen, their perfect civilization's protocols offering no guidance for this situation. Ambassador Kethvar's forehands trembled as he tried to activate security systems that simply refused to function in the presence of this impossible visitor. "Please, don't be alarmed by your technology's temporary limitations," Dr. Vasquez continued, settling into a chair that definitely hadn't been there moments before. "We're not interfering with your systems. Our presence simply operates on frequencies that your equipment wasn't designed to handle." Elder Vashti's crystalline form pulsed erratically as she struggled to process what she was seeing. You're human, but the readings, you're existing in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously." Dr. Vasquez smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed warmth, sadness, and infinite patience all at once. "Yes, we've changed considerably during our absence. The journey we undertook required adaptations. We are still human, but we've become human in ways that your species haven't yet imagined possible." General Thex found his voice, though his scarred carapace continued to click with nervous energy. "Where did you go? What happened to your entire civilization 800 years ago?" "We went to war," Dr. Vasquez replied simply. "Not against any species, not against any threat that existed in this dimensional phase. We went to fight something that was approaching your galaxy from outside the known universe entirely." The holographic display activated without anyone touching the controls, showing images that defied comprehension, vast entities moving through spaces between realities, beings of such alien malevolence that the council members instinctively recoiled from their mere representation. "We called them the Devourers," Dr. Vasquez explained. "They consume realities, not just planets or species, but entire dimensional frameworks. They turn universes into emptiness, leaving behind voids where not even the concept of existence remains." Dr. Niren's tentacles writhed as she studied the impossible images. "But how did you detect them when our most advanced sensors found nothing?" "Because you were looking in the wrong dimensions," Dr. Vasquez answered gently. "The Devourers exist primarily outside conventional spacetime. By the time they manifest fully in any reality, it's already too late to mount effective resistance." Representative Liss struggled to understand the implications. "You said you went to war against them." "For 800 years?" Dr. Vasquez's expression grew somber. "Time flows differently when you're fighting across multiple realities simultaneously. For us, the war lasted approximately 3 million years. We experienced every moment of those millennia while maintaining our connection to this timeline, the council chamber, fell silent as the members tried to process the concept of beings who had lived through millions of years of warfare, while only 8 centuries passed in normal space. The war required us to become something more than we had been, Dr. Vasquez continued. We couldn't fight entities that exist across multiple dimensions while remaining locked into a single reality. So we evolved, adapted, transcended the limitations of single-dimensional existence. Elder Vashti's computational processes struggled with the philosophical implications. You transformed your entire species. Voluntarily. Every human chose their path, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. Some became pure energy, capable of fighting in dimensional spaces where matter cannot exist. Others became living quantum equations, able to rewrite local reality through applied mathematics. Still others became temporal shepherds, capable of experiencing all possible timelines simultaneously. Counselor Zarn accessed economic models that immediately crashed upon trying to calculate the resource requirements for such transformation. The energy costs alone should have been impossible. How did you manage such massive changes to your fundamental nature? Dr. Vasquez gestured, and the holographic display showed human colonies in the final days before their disappearance. But now the council members could see what had really been happening. Not just construction projects, but the systematic conversion of matter into energy, the transformation of entire worlds into processing centers for consciousness transfer. We converted our entire material civilization into the raw energy needed for dimensional transcendence, she explained. Planets, ships, industrial infrastructure, everything became fuel for our species' evolution. It was the largest coordinated effort in known history, involving every human who had ever lived. General Thex found this detail particularly disturbing. Every human who had ever lived? Death as you understand it becomes irrelevant when consciousness can exist independently of matter, Dr. Vasquez replied. We retrieved every human mind that had ever existed, integrated their knowledge and experience into our collective consciousness. The war was fought not just by the humans alive at the time of our departure, but by every human who had ever contributed to our species' development. The implications staggered the council members. Humanity hadn't just evolved, they had become a collective entity incorporating the accumulated knowledge and experience of their entire species across all of history. And you won this war? Representative Lees asked quietly. Dr. Vasquez's expression became complex, showing emotions that spanned multiple dimensional states. We achieved our objective. The Devourers have been contained. Their advance into this reality cluster has been stopped. But victory in conventional terms became meaningless when the conflict transcended conventional existence. The entities you fought, where are they now? Dr. Nyron asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Sealed away in dimensional spaces that we created specifically to contain them, Dr. Vasquez replied. But sealing them required sacrifices. Many of us remain as eternal guardians existing in states of consciousness that preclude return to normal reality. They fight an endless war to maintain the barriers that protect your universe. Elder Vashti processed this information and reached a disturbing conclusion. You're not all back, are you? What we're seeing is only a fraction of what humanity became. Correct, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. Those of us who can still interface with single-dimensional reality have returned to check on the galaxy we left behind. To ensure that our sacrifice achieved its purpose, the protection of the civilizations we once knew. Ambassador Kethvar finally managed to ask the question that terrified every council member. What do you want from us now? What does a species that has transcended dimensional limitations need from civilizations like ours? Dr. Vasquez's smile carried infinite sadness and infinite hope. We want to know that we didn't lose ourselves completely in becoming what we needed to become. You represent the galaxy we fought to protect, the civilizations we gave up our humanity to save. Your continued existence validates our sacrifice. But, she continued, we also bring a warning. The Devourers were only the first wave. Other entities exist in the spaces between realities, and some of them are far more dangerous than what we've already faced. The galaxy needs to prepare for challenges that your current civilizations are not equipped to handle. General Thex's military training finally provided a framework for understanding. You're offering to help us prepare for future threats? We're offering to teach you what we learned about adaptation, about surviving challenges that seem impossible, about becoming more than what you are while remaining true to what you are, Dr. Vasquez replied. But the choice must be yours. We will not impose change upon civilizations that have found peace. The council members looked at each other, realizing they faced the most important decision in galactic history. The humans had returned not as conquerors or refugees, but as guardians offering to share the terrible wisdom they had gained through unimaginable sacrifice. Outside the chamber, the lights of 1,000 perfectly ordered civilizations continued to shine, but now each light carried the potential to become something far greater than what it had ever dared to imagine. The council chamber remained silent for what felt like eternity, as each member contemplated the choice before them. Dr. Elena Vasquez waited patiently, her multi-dimensional presence a constant reminder of what transformation could achieve and what it might cost. Elder Vashti was the first to speak, her crystalline form pulsing with deep contemplation. Dr. Vasquez, you offer to teach us adaptation and growth, but our civilizations have achieved something humanity never did during your time in this galaxy. Perfect peace. Why should we risk that for unknown challenges that may never come? Dr. Vasquez's expression showed understanding rather than judgment. Peace is precious, Elder Vashti. We remember the value of tranquility, the beauty of societies that have eliminated conflict and suffering. What you've achieved is remarkable and should not be abandoned lightly, she gestured, and the holographic display showed images of the current galaxy, the harmony worlds with their perfect empathy, the efficient Mandorian military formations, the pristine crystalline research stations, the optimized trade networks, the violence-free Federation colonies. But, she continued gently, peace built on the elimination of challenge eventually becomes stagnation. The devourers we fought weren't the only entities that exist in the spaces between realities. Some of the others specifically target civilizations that have achieved perfect stability, because stable societies become predictable, and predictable societies become vulnerable. General Thex's scarred carapace clicked as he processed the military implications. You're saying that our perfection has made us defenseless? Not defenseless, Dr. Vasquez corrected, but specialized to the point where adaptation becomes difficult. Your military doctrine is flawless for conventional warfare, General. But how would it handle enemies that exist in 17 dimensions simultaneously? Your telepathic harmony works beautifully for empathetic species, Ambassador Kethvar. But what about entities that communicate through concepts that cause insanity in unprotected minds? Representative Liss accessed her society's psychological profiles and found disturbing gaps. Our people have been neurologically modified to be incapable of violence. We literally cannot conceive of harming others. But what if harmlessness becomes a vulnerability when facing beings that see kindness as weakness to be exploited? Dr. Nyron's scientific training provided a framework for understanding the dilemma. You're describing the difference between optimization and resilience. Our civilizations have become perfectly adapted to stable conditions, but we've lost the ability to handle radical changes. Exactly, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. The humans of 800 years ago were considered nightmarish because we thrived on uncertainty, chaos, and impossible challenges. Those traits seem destructive in a peaceful galaxy, but they became essential when facing threats that existed outside normal reality. Counselor Zarn reviewed economic models and found the same pattern everywhere. Our prosperity depends on predictable conditions. If reality itself becomes unstable, our entire system of resource allocation would collapse within days. Dr. Vasquez nodded sadly. This is why we offer choice rather than demanding change. What we learned in our war against the Devourers is that transformation must be voluntary to be sustainable. Forced evolution creates beings that are powerful but fundamentally broken. Elder Vashti accessed her deepest computational processes, analyzing the philosophical implications of the choice before them. If we choose to learn from you, what would that process involve? Would we need to abandon our current civilizations entirely? Not at all, Dr. Vasquez replied, her voice carrying reassurance across multiple dimensional frequencies. The goal isn't to become like us. That path is both unnecessary and impossible for your species. The goal is to develop your own forms of adaptive resilience while maintaining the peace and prosperity you've achieved. The holographic display shifted to show theoretical models of hybrid civilizations, societies that maintain their core values while developing the flexibility to handle unprecedented challenges. The Zephyrians could learn to extend their empathy beyond conventional consciousness, developing the ability to understand and communicate with entities from other realities. Dr. Vasquez explained. The Mandorians could evolve their military doctrine to include strategic principles that account for enemies who don't follow logical patterns. She continued, showing specific applications for each civilization. The crystalline scientist could expand their research to include studies of unstable realities, learning to maintain scientific rigor even when fundamental laws become fluid. The merchant guilds could develop economic systems that remain functional during reality-altering events. The peaceful federation could learn forms of protective action that don't require violence, but can still defend against malevolent entities. General Thex found himself intrigued despite his reservations. These adaptations would allow us to maintain our core achievements while developing resilience against unknown threats. Yes, but more importantly, Dr. Vasquez replied, they would restore your capacity for growth. Perfect societies tend to stop evolving, which eventually leads to decline. Controlled adaptation prevents stagnation while preserving what's valuable about your current achievements. Ambassador Kethavar realized the deeper implication. You're offering to help us become the best versions of ourselves rather than copies of humanity. Precisely, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. Humans became what we are because that's what was necessary for us to fight our particular war. Your species will face different challenges and should develop different solutions. We can teach principles of adaptation, but the specific forms that adaptation takes must emerge from your own nature and needs. Representative Liss accessed psychological analyses that showed her people's readiness for such challenges. Our citizens have lived in perfect peace for centuries. Would they even be capable of the psychological changes required for such development? Dr. Vasquez's expression became gentle, showing infinite patience gained through millions of years of experience. Change doesn't have to be traumatic. Growth can be gradual, voluntary, and guided by each individual's capacity and inclination. Not every citizen needs to become an interdimensional warrior. Diverse societies need diverse types of strength. The council members exchanged glances, each processing the decision through their species' particular way of thinking. The choice wasn't just about accepting help from the returned humans. It was about whether to risk their perfect civilizations for the possibility of becoming something greater. Elder Vashti spoke for the group. Dr. Vasquez, if we choose to accept your guidance, what assurance do we have that we won't lose ourselves in the process of change? Dr. Vasquez's smile carried the wisdom of beings who had faced the ultimate test of identity. Because that's precisely the lesson we learned during our transformation. The humans who remain as eternal guardians maintain their essential humanity, despite existing in states of consciousness that transcend individual identity. Change and preservation aren't opposites. They're complementary aspects of true growth. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Each civilization chose to begin the careful process of developing adaptive resilience while maintaining their core achievements. Not every citizen would participate, not every world would change, but the galaxy as a whole chose growth over stagnation. Dr. Vasquez began to fade as the first session concluded, her multidimensional presence becoming less focused in their reality. We'll establish learning centers throughout the galaxy, staffed by those of us who can still interface with single-dimensional consciousness. The process will take generations, but you have time. The next wave of challenges won't arrive for several centuries. And, she added with a final smile, you won't face those challenges alone. Some of us will always remain to help, to guide, to stand with you against whatever emerges from the spaces between realities. You gave us purpose by existing to be protected. We give you hope by proving that even the most difficult challenges can be overcome. As Dr. Vasquez disappeared completely, the council members looked out at the lights of their 1,000 civilizations with new understanding. The great peace was ending, but what was beginning might be even greater, a time of growth, challenge, and possibility. The humans had returned not as conquerors or saviors, but as teachers offering the greatest gift they had learned, that being truly alive meant being ready to become more than what you are, while never forgetting what you are. Outside the chamber, the lights of 1,000 civilizations began to shine with new purpose, no longer perfect but infinitely more alive, ready to face whatever wonders and terrors the universe might bring. The humans were back and the galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.